What happens when a decorated cop thinks he's nabbed a dangerous criminal, only to realize he's crossed paths with a covert CIA agent? In just 9 heart-pounding minutes, a Baltimore street erupts into chaos. Loyalties are tested, and a single mistake unravels a web of secrets that could shake the city. Buckle up, this story of courage, regret, and redemption will keep you glued to the screen. Officer James Carter had spent years patrolling the vibrant streets of Baltimore, a city pulsing with energy and simmering with tension. Under the bronze glow of streetlights, the day's warmth lingered on the sidewalks and stoops. He'd just finished his favorite coffee, a double espresso from the Starbucks on Pratt Street, a name that felt familiar and reliable when his radio crackled to life. A report came in about suspicious activity near Lexington Market. Informants claimed they'd seen a man exchanging envelopes for cash, possibly drugs or stolen goods. James wasn't sure, but he felt that heightened awareness his years in uniform had sharpened. Tonight he was on foot patrol, one of the rare times he opted to leave the cruiser behind. The radio buzzed with faint coded signals. He recalled his fiancée's gentle advice that morning. Stay safe. He'd nodded casually, never dwelling too much on it. But tonight, something felt off in the air, a thick, humid weight of possibility. As he turned into a dimly lit street, he spotted a dark sedan parked illegally. Its engine was running headlights off. A figure stood beside it, tall and lean, wearing an unzipped black leather jacket over a plain t-shirt. He was African American, with a calm demeanor scanning his surroundings as if expecting trouble. James's instincts flared with suspicion. Why would someone stand so boldly in this neighborhood at this hour? Gripping his flashlight tightly, he steadied his breathing. The city's tensions around policing and race lingered in his mind, but he swallowed his hesitation. He had to check this out. A quick glance at the license plate. Nothing flagged. James moved forward, the gravel crunching under his boots, betraying his presence. The man by the car visibly tensed. James called out, "Sir, I need you to stay right there." The simple phrase sparked like a match in the dark. The man turned slowly, half his face lit by the streetlight, calm, alert, with no trace of fear in his eyes. That's when the puzzle began to take shape. Something was wrong, something deeper than a random street deal. James tried to keep confidence in his voice. "Put your hands where I can see them." The man complied, raising both hands to shoulder height, but there was no panic, no flinch. Instead, he locked eyes with the officer, silently calculating. A fleeting tension flickered. Was the suspect armed? Were accomplices waiting? James had no idea this encounter would alter both their lives, setting off a chain of events unstoppable once begun. His heart pounded with an anxious rhythm, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He stepped closer, scanning for visible weapons. The man's posture exuded discipline, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. That alone unnerved James. Typical street hustlers fidgeted, blinked too much, or muttered excuses. This man's stillness spoke volumes. "Do you have any ID?" James demanded, his voice louder than usual to mask his own unease. In response, the stranger's lips curved into a faint smile. "Of course." "Officer," he said, his voice soft but resonant. He slowly reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim black wallet. James's flashlight caught a glimpse of what looked like an official badge. He flinched back, shifting into a defensive stance. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he repeated, his agitation rising. This wasn't a standard script. The man raised an eyebrow. One hand still on the wallet. "Officer," he began in a measured tone. "I'm CIA. My name is Marcus Hayes. This is my ID. I'd like to show it to you, slowly." James's skepticism surged. CIA in this neighborhood. At this hour, it sounded far-fetched. He'd heard every excuse from "I'm a city inspector" to "I'm an FBI witness," but CIA was a new one. His flashlight beam hit the man's wallet. Shiny letters on a sleek ID stared back. Central Intelligence Agency, with a photo matching the man before him. But something in James refused to settle. "Mind if I take a closer look?" he asked, stepping nearer. Marcus handed over the ID. It looked legitimate. Holograms, watermarks, and official seals. Intact. Name: Marcus Isaiah Hayes. Date of birth showed he was 35. He didn't look a day over 30. A swirl of doubt and unease, mixed with a crackling undercurrent of tension in the thick, humid air. "Can you tell me what you're doing here?" James probed, reflexively clutching the ID. Marcus exhaled slowly, weighing how much to reveal. "I'm part of a joint operation involving the DEA and local authorities," he said carefully. "We're tracking a major trafficking route running through Baltimore." James's brows furrowed. Why hadn't he heard about such an operation? Surely there'd be a memo or so, he thought. Something in Marcus's explanation rang a bell of suspicion in his mind. He sensed a half-truth or withheld details. Covert ops were often kept secret, so he couldn't entirely dismiss Marcus's claim. But his gut told him something else was at play. The air felt charged, like storm clouds about to unleash. James could feel sweat on his brow, a mix of humidity and stress. This wasn't a simple cop-civilian interaction. Marcus Hayes, if that was truly him, carried an aura of danger, a shadow of unpredictability. What James didn't realize was that he was about to be pulled deep into a high-stakes confrontation, one that transcended the boundaries of law, morality, and identity, culminating in a twist he could never foresee. The city around them seemed to fade, leaving only the dimly lit street stillness. James's earpiece buzzed, reminding him he wasn't entirely alone. He wasn't sure whether to call for backup. If Marcus was really CIA calling in reinforcements, could ruin a covert mission, not to mention spark a major interagency disaster. But letting a potential criminal slip away wasn't an option. "You're coming with me," James said, his voice firmer than intended. Marcus's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Officer, if you detain me, you're putting lives at risk." James cut him off. "I have to verify your identity at the station. That's standard procedure." The unyielding resolve in his voice was both protocol and pride. He had to do things by the book, or so he convinced himself. Marcus sighed frustration clear on his face. He glanced at his watch. Its glowing face read 11:47 p.m. He seemed agitated, as if he had somewhere urgent to be. A silent countdown ticked in his mind. "Fine," he conceded, stepping forward, all the hands still raised. "But you need to understand, time is critical. A major operation is underway, and I'm a key player." James unhooked his handcuffs. The metallic clink echoed in the street's silence. As Marcus's wrists were secured, A flurry of movement erupted from the shadows. A second figure appeared, tall, masked, and armed. James barely registered the threat before a muzzle flashed under the street light. "Officer, get down!" Marcus shouted, but James had already ducked. Reflexes honed by years of training, the attacker's bullet whizzed past them. James dropped to one knee hand on his radio, signaling for help. Another shot rang out, slamming into the car door. Sparks flew. Marcus' hands, cuffed behind him, had no way to defend himself. The shooter, seeing the officer's quick response, cursed and fled into the dark. James hesitated, torn between chasing the gunman or securing his detainee. Don't let the suspect escape, his training urged. He could still see the shadow vanishing down the alley. In another scenario, James might have pursued, but Marcus's calm presence bound beside him changed everything. James muttered a curse. "Who the hell was that?" Marcus's chest heaved. "If you uncuff me, I can find out," he snapped, his voice laced with frustration. Now James felt more conflicted than ever. The presence of a gunman complicated things. He recalled Marcus's earlier words. Time is critical. That swift action certainly backed Marcus's claim of being in the middle of something highly dangerous. Yet the lethal possibility that Marcus might be playing a deeper game kept James on edge. He was caught between protocol and an imminent threat. Backup, or not verifying Marcus's story, wouldn't be a quick 5-minute call. 9 minutes. The next 9 minutes would pave the way for an explosive revelation neither could anticipate. James pulled Marcus to his feet, scanning the alley for signs of the assailant. His pulse thumped in his ears. Time seemed to slow each second, stretching like they were in a living, breathing hourglass. His radio crackled again, a dispatcher's query about his status. He fumbled for the talk button. "This is Officer Carter. We've had shots fired near Lexington Market. Suspect fled on foot. I'm detaining an individual requesting immediate backup." The response was almost instant. "Copy, Officer Carter. Units en route." Marcus's gaze bored into James. "Officer, if you delay me now, people will die," he said softly, each word growing more urgent. "I'm not your enemy." James bristled, but nodded with a sliver of doubt. Did he truly believe Marcus was a threat? The ID looked legitimate. The fact they'd just been shot at lent credibility to Marcus's story. Yet his sense of duty surged. He had to confirm everything. His mind raced with possible scenarios. He couldn't ignore that Marcus was black, and he was a white officer in a city rife with racial tensions. One wrong move, and this could become national news overnight. Headlights from an approaching cruiser pierced the darkness, reflecting off brick walls. 2 uniformed officers, an older one with a grim expression and a younger one with wide, cautious eyes, approached warily. James nodded to his colleagues. "What's the situation?" the senior officer asked. "I was investigating suspicious activity. This man claims he's CIA. We took fire. Suspect fled. No injuries, I've got him cuffed." Marcus recounted his story about being part of a sensitive operation. The older officer's expression hardened with disbelief. He reached for his radio to contact the precinct. In the tense silence, Marcus's face tightened with growing frustration. He could see time slipping away, his mission unraveling by the second. He turned to James, his voice low. "If I don't contact my team, The suspect we're tracking, the real criminal, will disappear. Do you understand what that means?" James clenched his jaw. He'd been an officer for years, priding himself on fairness and integrity. If Marcus was truly CIA, detaining him could derail a major operation or even cost lives. On the other hand, releasing him without solid confirmation could be catastrophic if he was lying. The senior officer at the scene chimed in, teams checking with local feds. "This'll take a while." A flash of irritation crossed Marcus's eyes. He seemed to weigh his options. His cuffed hand strained slightly behind him. A bead of sweat rolled down James's forehead as the situation escalated. Each passing second carried an ominous finality. Just then, an unmarked SUV screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth. A man in a dark suit stepped out, flanked by two others in plain clothes. They flashed badges toward the officers. The group's leader, a Latino man with a short-cropped haircut, introduced himself as Agent Luis Rivera of the DEA. "I need to speak with Marcus Hayes." "Now," Rivera said, ignoring the wary glances from the uniformed cops. James and the senior officer exchanged looks. Another wave of confusion hit them. The mention of Marcus's name added significant weight to his story. James's gut twisted as he realized his detainee might not be lying. Rivera turned to Marcus, concern and frustration etched on his face. "Where's your gear? We were supposed to meet 20 minutes ago." Marcus shot a pointed glance at James's cuffs. "A slight delay," he said, with a hint of bitterness. Rivera barked at the officers. "Release him. He's with us." James hesitated, adrenaline still coursing through him. He glanced at the older colleague, who shrugged and nodded in approval. "We just need to make sure everything's in order," the senior officer muttered to Rivera. Rivera pulled out his phone, swiped through a few screens, and showed them an authorization letter on CIA and DEA letterhead, listing Marcus Hayes' name and referencing a joint operation. It was official. James held his breath. A wave of relief and guilt churned in his chest. He'd done his job by the book, but he might have just disrupted a critical operation. He unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists and shot James a look. It was the first time real anger flared in those sharp eyes. Agent Rivera glanced at his watch. "We can still make this work, but we're cutting it close now." He turned to Marcus. "You're with me." Marcus paused, locking eyes with James, and saying, "I told you you'd regret this." The words weren't quite a threat, but a statement, a marker of consequences, both legal and moral, unfolding. In the swirl of retreating headlights, James felt the sting of humiliation at potentially botching an operation that could cost innocent lives. Adrenaline surged, mingling with growing dread. This scenario was about to get far more complicated, and the next few minutes would be pivotal. As Marcus climbed into the SUV, and Rivera prepared to leave, the darkness erupted again. Two black vans roared onto the street, tires screeching. The first screeched to a halt, sideways, blocking the DEA's unmarked vehicle. Figures in dark tactical gear poured out, wielding automatic weapons. Down someone yelled, and instantly gunfire tore through the alley. The senior officer and younger cop dove for cover behind their cruiser. James scrambled behind a dumpster, his heart pounding like a drum. Agent Rivera reversed the SUV, but the second van cut off their escape. They were trapped. Bullets sparked, ricocheting off metal and brick. Sparks flared in the dark. James peeked around the dumpster and saw Marcus crouched low in the passenger seat. Rivera tried to return fire through an open window. The masked attackers moved in efficient formation, like a well-trained paramilitary unit. This wasn't a random gang hit. This was a coordinated assault. A bullet shattered the DEA SUV's windshield. Rivera cried out, glass shards cutting his arm. Marcus cursed under his breath, grabbing Rivera's pistol and aiming through the broken window. His quick shots found their mark. One masked figure collapsed. The others advanced without flinching. James's radio crackled with panicked calls for more backup. Another bullet whizzed past the dumpster, forcing him to flatten himself. He'd never seen criminals with such heavy weaponry on these streets. The presence of these heavily armed vans suggested a deeper conspiracy. Something massive was unfolding. Amid the chaos, Marcus pushed open the passenger door, scanning for cover. Then, unexpectedly, he locked eyes with James. In that fleeting moment, the hostility between them dissolved, replaced by survival instinct. "Officer, I need you," Marcus barked over the gunfire, his voice cutting through the panic. James nodded grimly. He realized that if they didn't work together, neither would make it out alive. He readied his pistol. A surge of adrenaline sharpened his senses, steadying his hands. He focused entirely on the threat ahead. Marcus and James signaled silently. James would lay down, covering fire from one angle, Marcus from another. James waited for Marcus's cue. With a nod, both emerged from cover. Gunfire erupted again. Shouts. The masked attackers staggered under the steady barrage. The dark vans revved, pulling back in a frantic bid to escape. Tires screeched black smoke billowing in Baltimore's humid air. One van's driver was hit, and the vehicle swerved, crashing into a lamppost. Its doors flew open, and the remaining attackers stumbled out, scattering into the dark. The second van roared off at high speed, vanishing around a corner. The air reeked of gunpowder and burnt rubber. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in fast. Marcus, panting cautiously, approached James, lowering Rivera's gun. Their eyes met a reluctant spark of respect in Marcus's gaze. Without a smile, Marcus nodded to James. "Thanks," he muttered. James, still reeling, only sighed. The real storm was yet to come. Police swarmed the scene within minutes. Patrol cars, SWAT vans, ambulances. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the bullet-riddled cars and shattered glass. Rivera clutched his injured arm, wincing as medics loaded him into an ambulance. The senior officer and younger cop were alive though shaken. No bystanders seemed to have been caught in the crossfire, a small miracle. Marcus refused medical attention, ignoring a cut on his knuckle from the broken window. Instead, he sought out the officer in charge. A stocky, no-nonsense lieutenant named Sarah Mitchell, who'd arrived with the cavalry. Marcus's CIA badge gleamed, making Mitchell clench her jaw. She didn't like her city turning into a battlefield. James stood nearby, his uniform dusted with grime and sweat. He could feel Marcus's eyes on him, the spinning lights, murmuring radios, and onlookers crowding the police tape created a surreal atmosphere enveloping the scene. Lieutenant Mitchell demanded an explanation. Agent Rivera from inside the ambulance did his best to summarize. "We're closing in on a major arms trafficking ring. We suspect ties to foreign operatives. Marcus was on the ground, gathering intel. They must have realized he was tracking them. Mitchell's gaze shifted to James. "So you detained a CIA agent mid-mission?" she asked, her calm voice, barely masking irritation. James swallowed, feeling the weight of his mistake. But before he could respond, Marcus interjected. "It was a complicated situation," Marcus said diplomatically. Mitchell nodded, but the tension lingered. Amid the chaos, James found himself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, relief at surviving guilt for disrupting the operation, and an odd respect for Marcus. "This isn't over," Marcus told Mitchell. "We need to debrief immediately. I have intel that can't wait." The lieutenant considered for a moment, then pointed to a sleek black car pulling up behind the main convoy. An FBI official was stepping out. "You'll get your debrief," she said. "But we're looping in the FBI now. This is bigger than we thought." Marcus nodded, strain etched on his face. Without another glance, he turned and climbed into the black sedan. As the door slammed shut, James felt a sense of finality. Marcus Hayes was gone for now, but the echo of that night would haunt James. He'd done everything by the book, yet it still felt like a colossal mistake. The days ahead would unfold in ways none of them could predict. Baltimore's morning news exploded with headlines about a high-intensity shootout near Lexington Market, describing masked assailants and speculating about a covert operation. Online rumors swirled with conspiracy theories thriving. James woke to a flood of texts, colleagues checking on him, his fiancée frantic after seeing the news. But there were official calls to handle too. He arrived at the precinct, tension heavy on his shoulders. An internal affairs officer waited in a quiet corner, arms crossed, ready to ask hard questions. Word of James detaining a CIA agent had spread, causing embarrassment and frustration among top brass. The precinct's halls buzzed with chatter. Some officers clapped his shoulder in solidarity. Others avoided his gaze. James took a deep breath and stepped into the interview room, his mind still reeling from the previous night's events. The Internal Affairs Officer, Laura Bennett, sat with a pen poised over a notepad. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. "Officer Carter, let's walk through last night from your perspective. Start at the beginning." James recounted everything: the suspicious report, the confrontation with Marcus, the mystery gunman, the DEA's arrival, and the subsequent shootout. Throughout, Laura scribbled notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. James tried to convey that he'd acted in good faith, following protocol, trying to keep the streets safe. When he finished, Laura sighed. "Do you understand the predicament this department's in?" she asked. "The CIA's involvement, DEA agents nearly killed." "It's a mess," James nodded, a weight settling in his chest. "I just did what I thought was right," he said softly. Laura studied him. "I believe you. But the higher-ups are rattled. They want to ensure no officers detaining federal agents recklessly based on certain biases." She didn't say racism, but the word hung in the air like an unspoken accusation. James's jaw tightened. He'd always strived to be fair. The idea that racism might have influenced his actions felt like a punch to the gut. Sure, Marcus was black, but he didn't detain him for racial reasons. At least that's what James told himself. Or was there some subconscious bias at play? Before James could respond, a knock came at the door. Lieutenant Mitchell stepped in, handing him a file. "We've got an interagency briefing in an hour. CIA, DEA, FBI. They want your statement, Carter. James nodded, his stomach twisting. He knew Marcus Hayes would be there. The thought made his pulse quicken with a mix of shame and defiance. The real scrutiny was about to begin. James would have to face Marcus directly, maybe even apologize. But more than that, he'd have to grapple with the looming question of whether he truly harbored hidden biases, or if this was simply a tragic collision of duty and secrecy. The briefing took place in a secure conference room inside Baltimore's FBI field office. The walls were soundproofed blinds drawn. A large oval table dominated the space with placards for various agencies. James felt out of place among the suits and stern faces. Marcus Hayes sat at one end, his expression unreadable next to Agent Rivera, his arm in a sling, an FBI special agent in charge. A slim woman with piercing eyes named Emily Larson chaired the meeting. She called the room to order. We're here to coordinate efforts, post last night's incident, and resolve any misunderstandings between local law enforcement and federal agencies. She began, her tone calm, but the room's tension palpable. Marcus's eyes flicked to James, who tried to maintain eye contact. Agent Rivera briefed the room on the arms trafficking ring. The group we're after has highly dangerous overseas connections. We suspect last night's attackers were mercenaries hired by this syndicate to secure a critical weapons shipment. Emily Larson turned her attention to Marcus Agent Hayes. What can you provide? Marcus stood crossing the room to a large screen. He displayed satellite images pinpointing cargo ships at Baltimore's port. My intel indicates a shipment arrives tomorrow night, disguised as routine goods. We're tracking shipping containers believed to hold advanced weaponry. My goal was to confirm container numbers on the ground, which is why I was near Lexington Market. Suspects were monitoring local informants there. A low murmur rippled through the room as Marcus presented evidence of intercepted calls and financial transactions tying the weapons deal to a known international crime network. James listened, awestruck by the operation's scope. He realized how close he'd come to derailing it when he intervened. When Marcus finished, Emily Larson turned to James Officer Carter. I understand there was a confrontation with Agent Hayes that led to his detention. Care to clarify? James swallowed, his cheeks flushing. He recounted his story, again emphasizing protocol and his suspicions that night. He concluded, I regret the confusion. I wasn't briefed on any federal operations and acted on instinct to maintain peace. He met Marcus's eyes, attempting a silent apology. Marcus's expression was guarded, but a flicker of understanding seemed to pass. Emily Larson nodded. Very well. We'll treat it as an unfortunate misunderstanding. The focus now is stopping that arms shipment from hitting the streets. We'll form a joint task force. Baltimore PD can assist with traffic and perimeter control. FBI, DEA, and CIA will handle the main incursion. Understood. Tactical diagrams and potential timelines flashed on the screen. The meeting ended with orders to reconvene in the morning for final planning. As the group filed out, Marcus lingered by James. For a long moment, neither spoke, the swirl of government agents parting around them. Finally, Marcus said, I hope we can work together to stop this. Mistakes aside, you held your own in a firefight. James nodded tentatively, a wave of relief washing over him. Maybe I can make up for it if we both get through the next round unscathed. The following night arrived with storm clouds rolling over the harbor. The moon hid behind a swirling black veil, and faint thunder rumbled. The Joint Task Force assembled at a staging area near Baltimore's port. FBI tactical teams checked their weapons. DEA agents reviewed cargo manifests, and a small CIA contingent, led by Marcus Hayes, kept their distance, prepping specialized surveillance gear. James and a handful of Baltimore PD officers were assigned to secure the perimeter. Lieutenant Mitchell had insisted on local law enforcement's presence, if only to maintain order. Post-operation, James surveyed the scene from a vantage point behind stacked shipping containers, rain-pattered droplets rolling off his cap and vest. The radio's hushed chatter amplified the tension, a nervous current linking everyone on site. He spotted Marcus a short distance away conferring with Rivera. Even from afar, Marcus's posture was taut, his face grim with focus. Suddenly, Marcus turned and caught James's eye. They nodded a silent acknowledgement that for better or worse, they were in this together. At exactly 11:15 p.m., Intel reported the target container was being moved from the dock to a nearby warehouse for inspection. Strike teams moved into position sealing exits. The plan was to catch the smugglers as they opened the container. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating towering cranes and stacked cargo. The target container was lowered to the ground with a metallic thud. For a moment, everything was still, as if the entire operation held its breath. Then black SUVs rolled in, headlights off, weaving through the maze of containers. In the dark, figures emerged from the vehicles, armed men in black hoods and tactical gear, the same paramilitary style as the Lexington Market attackers. James's pulse quickened. Memories of that firefight flooded back. A man in a dark coat approached the container's locked door. "That's it," he said, in a gravelly voice audible through the comms. "Open!" One smuggler stepped forward with bolt cutters. The lock snapped, metal clanging on wet asphalt. A brief hesitation, then the heavy door creaked open. Inside were wooden crates stamped with foreign markings, a cache of high-tech weaponry enough to start a small war. James braced himself, his finger hovering near the radio's transmit button. The plan demanded waiting for the signal. Catch them in the act. Let them incriminate themselves. The smugglers began loading crates onto a forklift. Lightning flashed again. In that blinding light, James recognized the man giving orders. Vincent Malone, a notorious arms dealer, rumored to have ties to overseas terror groups. This was huge. Then Marcus's voice crackled in James's earpiece. Teams engage. Like a coiled spring, federal agents sprang from their positions. Floodlights blazed, piercing the darkness. Freeze hands up. Muzzles trained on targets, but Malone and his crew were ready. They lobbed smoke grenades, thick plumes rising in the wet night. Machine gun fire erupted in bursts. James heard agents shouting bullets, pinging off metal containers. The forklift lurched in the chaos. Its driver tried to flee with at least one crate. James clenched his jaw. This was turning into a full-blown battle. Through swirling smoke, he glimpsed Marcus and Rivera, weaving between containers, returning fire. An FBI agent went down clutching his leg. Another dragged him to cover. This was the tipping point. James exhaled sharply, drew his gun, and sprinted into the fray. Visibility was near zero in the smoke and pouring rain. Muzzle flashes lit the dark, deafening gunfire drowned out the thunder overhead. James took cover behind a steel container, panting, trying to orient himself. He caught fleeting glimpses of Malone's men, shadows dancing in the dark. Suddenly, Marcus appeared beside him, crouching low. "Officer Carter," he gasped, eyes wide with urgency. "Malone's trying to load crates on a truck to the east. We have to cut him off." James nodded, their eyes locking in silent agreement. They darted between rows of containers. Bullets whizzed past. The ground was slick, and James nearly lost his footing. Marcus grabbed his arm to steady him. Their interaction, forged in the heat of battle, replaced any lingering resentment. They spotted the forklift idling, carrying a crate of rifles. 2 armed smugglers stood guard, raising their weapons as Marcus and James emerged. The firefight was instantaneous. James dropped to a knee, firing controlled bursts. One smuggler staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Marcus landed 2 shots on the second guard. He went down. The forklift driver panicked and floored it. It surged forward but crashed into a stack of pallets. Marcus charged ahead, aiming at the driver. "Get out!" "Now!" he shouted. The terrified man complied, stumbling out with hands raised. But then a new threat emerged. Malone himself, pistol in hand, stepped from the shadows, his cold eyes fixed on Marcus. "Agent Hayes," he sneered. "I've heard about you. Always one step behind, aren't you?" Marcus's voice was low and steady. "It ends tonight, Malone." Malone smirked, raising his weapon. "I don't think so." The standoff crackled with tension. Rain poured, each drop briefly. Lit by flashing lightning, James edged forward, trying to position for a clean shot. Malone must have sensed the movement, swinging his gun toward James and firing. The shot's deafening crack rang out. Pain seared through James. He'd been grazed, the bullet tearing through his vest's edge. He stumbled, his vision blurring momentarily. Marcus roared a challenge and returned fire. In the chaotic dance of muzzle flashes, Malone dove behind a steel drum, dodging bullets. With startling agility, he bolted toward a waiting cargo truck. Marcus fired again, metal sparks flying as bullets hit the truck's side. James clutched his bleeding side. Adrenaline was the only thing keeping him upright. He grimaced and forced himself to follow. Marcus pursuing Malone around a corner. The cargo truck's engine roared to life. Malone slammed the door, tires screeching. Marcus lunged toward the driver's side, firing a desperate burst. The truck lurched forward, swerving erratically as Malone tried to break through the cordon. Before it could vanish into the container maze, a black DEA SUV roared from the opposite direction, headlights blazing. It rammed the cargo truck with a bone-jarring crash. Metal crumpled and the truck's wheels spun uselessly. Malone was trapped. Marcus yanked the door open, aiming at the arms dealer's chest. Malone sneered, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "You'll never stop the flow," he spat. "There's always another buyer." His taunt ended as Marcus slammed him against the steering wheel and cuffed him. Nearby, James sank to his knees, relief and pain flooding him. Sirens wailed across the port as the last pockets of resistance were quelled. Through the fog and flashing lights, Marcus caught James's eye. No words were needed. Both understood this was a hard-won victory and a personal turning point. The battle settled into the eerie silence of cleanup. Federal agents secured the seized weapons, tagging crates as evidence. Ambulances tended to the wounded. Rain fell steadily, washing gunpowder residue from the asphalt. James was checked by medics. The graze burned like fire, but it was superficial. He'd be fine. Marcus lingered, concern etched on his face. As medics bandaged James's side, Marcus stepped closer. "Thanks for your help, Marcus," said quietly. "We couldn't have done this without you and your department." James managed a pained smile. "Guess we both made up for things tonight." His expression softened, guilt resurfacing. "I'm sorry about earlier. You know, holding you up." Marcus's stance eased. "Covert ops are messy. We didn't coordinate with local PD due to suspected leaks. And I get that you had to follow procedure." He paused, glancing away. "But you should know your initial instinct to check suspicious activity wasn't wrong. You just didn't have the full picture." James nodded, a weight lifting from his chest. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder, briefly, a tangible sign of forgiveness. Not far off, Agent Rivera oversaw the weapons seizure. He approached, glancing at Marcus and James. A rare smile broke across his lips. "You two make quite a pair," he said, nodding to James with respect. "You saved lives tonight, Officer Carter, including ours." James accepted the praise with a humble nod. Beside the wrecked cargo truck, Malone was dragged away in cuffs by a team of DEA and FBI agents. Media cameras began gathering outside the security perimeter. The largest illegal arms bust in Baltimore's recent history was breaking news. In that moment, James felt karma's presence. He'd once hindered Marcus, nearly derailing the entire operation. Yet here he stood wounded, but victorious, playing a pivotal role in dismantling a dangerous criminal network. It was as if the universe had offered him a chance at redemption, and he'd seized it, earning Marcus's respect in the process. Days later, James sat at his kitchen table sipping coffee. The bandage on his side itched under his shirt. His fiancée hovered, reminding him not to overdo it. She flipped on the morning news, and James watched footage of the port raid. Helicopter shots captured the maze of containers, police cruisers, and federal vehicles. The anchor reported that a local officer had assisted federal agents in thwarting a major arms deal. James's name flashed on screen. He felt a strange mix of pride and discomfort. When the doorbell rang, he found a small package on the doorstep. No sender info, just a plain brown box. Inside was a simple black baseball cap embroidered with the CIA logo. Beneath it, a note read, "To James, in case you ever swing by." Langley Marcus. James smiled to himself. He knew it wasn't an official offer, just Marcus's way of saying they were on the same side now. A disaster sparked by suspicion and hostility had grown into a kind of mutual respect. Justice demanded more than black and white thinking. Sometimes it required trust, humility, and a willingness to see beyond appearances. Yet not everything was resolved. Media outlets, including national ones, questioned the initial detention of a black CIA agent by a white officer. Was it racial profiling? Was the stop necessary? Opinion pieces flooded online, dividing the city into factions. Some hailed James as a hero. Others condemned him as an example of systemic bias in policing. The Baltimore PD launched a formal review. James found himself back in a meeting room with Internal Affairs. This time, The atmosphere was even tenser due to media coverage. Laura Bennett watched him across the table. "You understand the department has to follow through," she said gravely. "We need to ensure you handled the situation objectively." James nodded, steeling himself. He calmly stated that race didn't factor into his decision. He'd encountered a man at a suspicious location, acting in a manner consistent with covert deals. Laura took notes, her expression unreadable. Before the final hearing concluded, an unexpected witness was brought in. Marcus Hayes, dressed sharply with his CIA badge clipped to his belt, testified via video conference. He explained the sensitive nature of the covert operation and that the confusion stemmed from a lack of coordination, not racial bias. He made it clear that James's actions, while inconvenient, were driven by a genuine concern for public safety. His words carried weight. After deliberation, the review board concluded no disciplinary action was needed. However, they recommended improved communication protocols between agencies and additional training on recognizing federal credentials. James breathed a sigh of relief. He could keep his badge and his integrity. He was grateful for Marcus, who had every reason to be bitter, but chose fairness and truth instead. Weeks later, James and Marcus met one last time at a coffee shop near the Inner Harbor. Marcus was in town to finalize paperwork on the arms seizure, and James was on leave. They shook hands, a gesture of mutual respect. James broke the silence, half laughing, half apologetic. "Sorry, you couldn't walk a Baltimore street without me showing up and ruining your night." Marcus smirked. "Here's hoping. Next time I'm in town, you don't make too much of a scene." They chatted about the case. Marcus revealed that the bust had severed a major illegal arms pipeline. It didn't end all gun crime, but it was a heavy blow to organized traffickers. He credited James for stepping up at the critical moment. Their conversation delved deeper. James admitted he'd wrestled with the possibility of racial bias. Marcus listened intently. "I can't speak for your subconscious," he said carefully. "But from what I saw, you were just a dedicated cop, doing your job in a flawed system. We both know racism in policing is real, but if we rush to blame every mistake on it, we miss the messier truths." James nodded, appreciating the nuance. They wrapped up discussing potential policy changes to prevent future disasters. Marcus suggested local PDs could have liaisons to coordinate with intel agencies. James vowed to pitch those ideas to his superiors. Outside gulls soared over the harbor. Sunlight glinted off the water. As they parted, James couldn't help but feel he'd glimpsed a better path forward, a way to unite law enforcement rather than divide it. Ultimately, Vincent Malone bore the heaviest karmic blow. Charged with multiple federal counts, he faced life in prison. The international crime syndicate he represented lost a critical foothold. Meanwhile, Marcus Hayes' star rose within the CIA, though he remained as humble and guarded as ever. For James Carter, life settled back to normal, but he wasn't the same man from that fateful night near Lexington Market. Near-death battles and moral dilemmas had reshaped him. He'd glimpsed how quickly assumptions could spark chaos, and how vital communication trust and sometimes setting pride aside for the greater good were. Occasionally, James touched the CIA cap on his coffee table, recalling Marcus's words and the harrowing, exhilarating night they'd shared. Though the system wasn't perfect, they'd tipped the scales of justice even slightly. And in that precarious balancing act, they'd found a measure of redemption for themselves and for a city yearning for fewer bullets in its skies. The story spread, capturing the public's imagination. A cop who tried to arrest a black CIA agent only to realize in mere minutes that everything he thought he knew could be upended. In the end, karma was a tide, washing away injustice and pride, leaving a bond forged in the crucible of crisis. A deeper understanding emerged between two men from different worlds, and a city awoke to find a flicker of hope through the storm clouds. In the eye of Baltimore's storm last night, a cop's devotion to duty collided with a covert CIA agent's deadly secrets. In 9 explosive minutes, everything he believed about justice, identity, even himself, was torn apart and pieced back together. Bullet casings and shattered glass may be swept away, but the echoes remain a warning that rushing to judgment can cost precious lives, and a testament to how we can bridge the deepest divides when facing immense danger. Officer James Carter found himself on a journey of self-reflection, forging an unbreakable bond with Marcus Hayes in the process. And here, in a city still scarred by conflict, they emerged stronger, shoulder to shoulder. If this gripping tale of a cop and a CIA agent teaming up against all odds inspired you, please help us share it. Hit the like button to show your love for stories of courage and redemption. Share this video with friends or family who enjoy real-life dramas that spark hope. Drop a comment below. Tell us what moment in James and Marcus's journey hit you hardest, or share your thoughts on trust in high-stakes moments. And if you're passionate about compelling narratives like this, please subscribe to our channel and tap the bell icon to catch every thrilling story we release. Your support helps us bring more tales of unity and justice to light. Thank you for being part of our community together. We're amplifying voices that matter